Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Mark Hannon from the City of Charles Sturt. I'm your host for today, and we're really excited to bring you this third instalment in the series of webinars that we've called Bite-Sized Bees. It's presented by Sandra of Adelaide Bee Sanctuary. For the last 5 years, we at the City of Charles Sturt have sponsored and hosted a number of Adelaide Bee Sanctuary hives across our community gardens and community centres. And we're busy working on our latest creation, a see-through glass observation hive. This hive, which some people have already nicknamed the Sea Hive, is at our Civic Library in Woodville in South Australia. We'll talk more about this in our final episode of the series on Wednesday. Now, for those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. Sandra and I are far from experts at webinar presenting. This is our third go at it, so what you'll see won't be as polished as what you normally see in TV land, but we give you our very best shot at it. Cross your fingers like we do, that all will go smoothly and you'll love what we have to share with you. I also encourage you to get comfortable with adjusting your on-screen Zoom controls. Play around with your own display sizes, make the presentation window bigger or smaller, use gallery view or speaker view. Have a go and make it work for you. Now, today, episode 3, we bring you Bees by Sea and Sky, the Navigator and the Dance Floor. We'd love for you to ask lots of questions in the Q&A chat panel, and we'll get Sandra to answer them at the end of her presentation. I'll come back to you for the Q&A segment once we're all done. Now, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Sandra for episode 3 of Bite-Sized Bees. Enjoy! Now watch me seamlessly fade to black, and then Sandra will appear.
So the first transport of bees probably occurred within Asia, and the earliest known records date from about mid-700 BC, when the Assyrian ruler Shamash-res-Uzzur brought bees from the mountains in the north to the land of Suhu on the middle Euphrates. And here you can see the image of a relief from the mid-700 BCs, and it shows Shamash, and on it says, "I am Shamash-res-Uzzur, governor of Suhu and Mari, bees which gather honey, which no one amongst my forefathers had seen, nor brought down to the land of Suhu. I brought them down from the mountains of Hubna and established them in the town of Gabari Ibini. They collect honey and wax. I understand how to do the melting out of the honey and wax, and the gardeners also understand it. Any later person who appears, let him ask the old men of the country whether it is true that Shamash-res-Uzzur, the governor of Suhu, introduced bees." The first transport of Apis mellifera, so from previous sessions we know that Apis mellifera is the Western or European honeybee, outside of the Old World by colonists from Britain and France, is thought to have occurred in 1617, and these bees probably travelled in a ship like the one shown here in this image. By 1990, these honeybees had spread over an additional 60% of the earth. Until the mid-1900s, honeybees could be transported from one continent to another only by sea, and the voyage by sea across the Atlantic lasted up to 6 to 8 weeks, and one documented from Europe to Australia up to 6 months. The earliest records describe how colonies of bees were kept alive on these voyages those records are about from the 1800s onwards. The timing of the transportation of bees was incredibly important, and bees would start their voyage in late autumn and winter. So why transport bees in late autumn and winter? Here we have 2 Langstroth hives commonly used in contemporary beekeeping. As you can see, the entrance of the hive is down below, and the bees are still able to leave the hive to fly despite the snow being outside. So why leave the hive if there's nothing to forage on? No nectar or pollen to collect, to store as honey and brood feed? Well, first, bees need to carry out their dead. There are undertaker bees in the beehive, and they do carry out their dead, and they fly and drop them over my neighbour's fence. But they also need to do something else. How do I put this delicately? They need to relieve themselves and go to the toilet. But in the case of bees, they're also very unique in this case. Because what happens if they are covered in by snow? Well, bees can hold their waste for a considerable period of time, And it's believed that the northern European bees are climatized to long winters and long confinement periods, and they would travel better than other races and subspecies on those long ship journeys. From a previous episode, I mentioned how bees can regulate their nest temperature to help them keep warm. So when traveling on these long sea voyages, bees would eat the stored honey. The rich carbohydrate source would help them shiver their flight muscles, which generate heat. And I also spoke about these heater bees, the one that you can see on the left here, that can increase its body temperature to over 43 degrees Celsius. They lie on top or next to developing brood or baby bees and radiate warmth to them. And the image on the right-hand side shows the capped brood and those particular holes that take up about 10% of the colony where these heater bees go in to warm up the babies. In late autumn and winter, the queen egg-laying capacity declines because the colony needs to have enough honey available throughout the winter and early spring. If the queen continues to lay 2,000 eggs a day, the reserves of honey would soon be depleted by the emerging brood. Female workers live longer during winter periods, which makes up for the decline in egg laying. And I have a question for you. Can anyone spot the queen? She's right there, right in the middle. Bit of fun for you. There she is. In addition to the decline in egg laying by the queen bee, the male bees or drones are thrown out. So in the middle of the screen, you can see one male drone and he is surrounded by 6 female worker bees. Prior to winter, the female worker bees will pull the drones out by their legs and literally shove them out the front of the entrance of the hive. Not all drones are removed. In more temperate regions, such as Adelaide, some drones are allowed to remain with the colony. But why throw out the drones? Well, the role of the drone, unlike the female worker bee, is to mate with the queens. Warm babies with their body mass, and some anecdotal evidence suggests that they also help with hive morale. Drones don't collect nectar or honey or protect the hive from predators because they actually don't have a stinger. But drones will eat the reserves of honey, and that's why the worker bees kick them out. So we now understand what's happening inside a hive in late autumn winter. So let's find out how they travelled. In December 1841, the Tomerton sailed from Plymouth to Wellington, and the passengers included a Mr. Cotton, who took hives of bees on board. In 1842, Mr. Cotton published his method for a 5-month voyage from England to New Zealand starting in November. He used ice to cool the bees and slow their metabolic rate. And in his own written words, he says, and I haven't got a man's voice here, but I'll try and pretend I am, an old hogshead fresh coopered and the joints properly fitted was lined throughout the coating with thick felt. A wooden platform supported the 4 straw skips, securely tied, each in a square cloth or dairy canvas, and with a ventilation hub. Dry cinders were packed round them. The bottom part was filled with ice, from which meltwater was drawn off and measured every day to know how much was left. I shall try and keep 1 to 2 stocks cool by means of evaporation. The hive is placed on board resting on springs. I have another suspended on gimbals, by the aid of which the hive will always remain upright. A wall of water entirely surrounds the hive. Fresh water is perpetually running into a double case in which the hive is placed from the ship's cistern. According to another passenger, Mr. Woodbury, the voyage was very stormy and protracted, which the sailors ascribed to the presence of bees on board. And his own words, he said, the hives were taken by forcible possession and all thrown overboard to the indescribable grief and disappointment of their amiable and enthusiastic owner. So I can honestly understand how poor Mr. Cotton must have felt when his bees were thrown overboard. In the early 1840s, a Mr. Neighbour sent out, in his own words, a nuts hive stocked with bees to New Zealand. We then adopted the plan of fixing the hive in a meat safe so the bees could fly about a little and also cleanse the hive of their dead. He did not say how the bees fared. It just happened that the first witnessed flight in a powered aeroplane by Orville and Wilbur Wright on the 20th of September 1904 had an incidental connection with beekeeping, because Al Root, the editor of Gleanings in Bee Culture, was the sole eyewitness of the flight, and the only first-hand description of it was published in his journal on the 1st of January 1905. And the first bees transported on an internal flight in the USA were 25 queens, who were passengers on the Boeing Air Mail plane. Their passage cost $10.40. And in contemporary beekeeping, queen bees are still transported via plane to Adelaide, and then they're shipped to myself via mail. They come to me in my postbox. So can you imagine what it must have been like for bees when they came to the New World, being let out for the first time and exposed to different floral scents, nectars and temperatures? So let's talk about the navigation of bees. We know from previous episodes that the waggle dance needs to occur on a vertical surface, that occurs in the dark, and the cushions of sensory hairs on the bees' joints are stimulated by the force of gravity, so the bees knows what's up and what's down. So let's look at this image. Dancing bees dancing in a simple circle. This indicates that the floral source is very close to the hive, and if there were lemon trees nearby, the dancing bee would also smell of lemon blossom. The other bees will then only need to take a couple of flights around the hive to find the feeding site nearby, and they'll also pick up on that lemon scent that the dancing bee is presenting to them. Bees that are watching the dancing bee stand stretched out stiffly in front of them. These outstretched antennae are displaced by the dancing bee and tells the bees what the angle of the waggle dance is relative to straight up on the vertical comb and therefore relative to the sun. The antennae also pick up the duration of each waggle dance and the length of the outbound flight. Remember, this is all happening in the dark. Bees cannot see in the dark of the hive. The waggle dance only lasts for a few seconds and is played out over an area about 2 to 5 centimetres. It's really a waggle stand rather than a run, as the dance bees do remain somewhat anchored to the comb. And because they're leaning forward, some dance bees become detached for a moment and stumble forward until a more stable grip is achieved. I guess many of us can think of being in a club where we've lost our footing and stumbled forward. The same thing happens here. So the waggle dance really only involves 1 or 2 steps. The bee dance also takes place exclusively on a very small area closest to the entrance of the hive. The dancers meet the foraging bees. So the foraging bees are in the last 2 weeks of their lifespan, and they're field bees. They're out in the field. So these foragers meet the dancers because they're interested in their message. And this dance floor is apparently chemically signposted by bees. So again, if you think of your favourite club and you've got the sign there, this is the sign place to watch the dancing occur. And research has found that if this part of the comb is cut out and put in a different location in the hive, the bees will actually search out that new location and resume their dancing again. So how do bees communicate the way to find a field of flowers? Well, unless us, we need to have sort of precise directions, okay? So from my place to the supermarket, it's go down Athelston Road for 400 metres, take a left at Russell Street, drive for about 200 metres, take a left at Gorge Road, another 100 metres on the left-hand side, we've got a supermarket. But bees can fly in a straight line, and the shortest way is by pointing directly to the goal, which is communicated through a vector. So in this image, the bees find their way to the food source by means of the sun compass, and a vector at the hive indicates the location of the food source relative to the position of the sun. However, the view from the beehive is never the same in all directions, and there are different details in the landscape. Bees have a visual odometer, which is influenced by the structure of the landscape along the flight path. Interestingly, it's also suggested that bees have different dialects. Bees from different races differ in their duration of the waggle dance, indicating that a different language or dialect might be spoken. And this is the interesting bit, because research has found that when bees dance on the comb, and remember on the previous episode when I talk about comb, I'm talking about the wax comb, not honeycomb, which the comb is filled with honey. But researchers found that when a bee dances on the comb, it vibrates. These vibrations are transmitted over the thickened rim, as you can see on the screen there, that thickened outer rim of the cell, which together forms a net on the surface of the comb. Dancing bees anchor their feet to the left and to the right side of the rim and then produce a vibration using their thoracic flight muscles to send out a basic frequency of about 230 to 270 cycles per second. Vibrations are then introduced into the dance floor when tension is exerted by the dancing bees and they're pulling strongly on either side of the cell rim. And each change in the direction of the dancing bees' abdomen in the wet waggle dance is a vibratory pulse. And again, don't forget this is all happening in the dark. So it's not only other bees' antennae that are picking up the movement, but so too are their feet in terms of vibrations that dancing bee is creating across the comb. And finally, the recruited bees that come on board are made up of both experienced and inexperienced worker bees who will follow the dance bee to the new site. It is the experienced bees with the local knowledge that will land first, and so they will soon be followed by the inexperienced bees. So how cool is that? Thank you, everybody, for listening to this session of Bite-Sized Bees. Here are the references I've used for the images and for the content. And if you have any questions, do contact me. And I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday at 1:00. Thank you.
Hello, Sandra.
Hey.
That was fantastic. Well done. Another great presentation from you on the Bite-Sized Bees topic. I have a question that the inexperienced bees, do they get taught by the more experienced bees, the whole business of the waggle dance? How do they learn that?
I haven't come across any literature of how they learn that, and I think that's the mystery of this, bees and beekeeping and that triangle of bee wisdom. Look, no, I haven't got an answer to that. I suspect that they just learn as they go by watching other bees and then mimicking them. That being said, I have been told that some bees who haven't performed a duty in the hive, if you just separate them from the bees and put them in another hive, they'll automatically do it without having to learn it. So there's still a lot unknown there. Yeah.
But part of it could be instinct and part of it could be, mimicking or observational type of thing, like human babies do with in their own development. Yeah, that's really interesting. I have a question here, not so much about the content, but are these sessions recorded to be made available later? That one's from Mandy. Yes, we are recording these, although it looked like I had a little technical snafu with the commencement of the recording of today's presentation. But yes, once we've completed the series, we will continue. We will post all of those up on our website. So I think through the magic and technical ability of our library team who are hosting most of this, they'll actually contact all of the people that have signed up and registered to let them know that's how you can see them. So hopefully that answers your question, Mandy. Yes, I love Zoom. Mandy's already written back to say, thank you, Mark. Do we have any other questions? Today we seem to be a little bit light on questions compared to other days. So if you've had anything that you wanted to know about bees, not just about today's content, but any questions about bees generally, feel free to pop them through. I'm just going to pop over through. This is me doing everything seamlessly. A check on the chat. Oh, here we go. We've got a question. Hi, Sandra and Mark. Another fascinating session. This is from Amy. Thank you. If bees get the waggle dance wrong, can it impact the overall health and success of the hive? If bees are less healthy, is their dance as effective? That's a great question. Fire away, Sandra.
Well, I immediately thought of bees being exposed to the neonics, the chemical that is used to coat seeds to prevent pesticides from getting into the seeds, and bees are then exposed to the pollen, which has the neonicotinoids in it, and that starts affecting their navigation. So I would suspect that there is a sublethal threshold that builds up from neonicotinoids, for example, that does affect bees' navigation. Beekeepers tend to pick that up more when the bees, the foraging bees, the field bees, have gone out to the field and they haven't found their way back again. It may influence their dance, but there's no research that I've come across about influencing a bee's dance on the dance floor, only that they get lost out there and then can't find their way back again. And chemicals are one big part of that. Yeah. Hope that answers your question in a way. Yeah.
I think what I'm gathering from all of that, apart from not use those in your garden, but we just don't know a lot about bees. We think we know lots of stuff about bees, but it just appears that there's so much more that we are yet to discover. So, which is fascinating for a creature that we've been alongside of for a couple of thousands of years at least. But we've still got so much more to learn. That's amazing. Here's a question from two questions. How do bees make honey? This is on behalf of Josh, who's aged 5. Can you tell us that process, please, Sandra, for Josh, who's 5? Thank you.
So, Josh, thank you. Thank you for your question. So bees make honey by flying out to a flower, and what they do is they suck up the nectar in the flower and they keep it in their crop, like a chicken's crop. They've got a crop, they store that. Then they fly back to the flower. This part here, they keep it in there.
Might be a bit technical for a 5-year-old.
Crop. This part. So they've got this special pouch in their neck, and that's where they keep it, and then they fly back to the beehive. And then the bee goes to the front of the beehive and she gives that nectar to another bee. Another bee takes all that nectar and goes up to a cell, a wax cell, and puts all that nectar in there and fills it up. And then what the bees have to do, because that nectar is very runny, it's like water. Then they fan their wings really, really hard to get rid of all that water. And once they've got that consistency, once it's like honey, they then put a little wax cap on it to store it, and there you have your honey. And they do lots and lots of those little cells every day. So that's how they make honey.
Well, that's exciting. We have another question from a person who's age 5, Orson. He would like to know how bees make their hive.
Right. So bees make their hive, they go and fly into let's say a hole in a tree. All of the bees go in there, and the first thing they need to do is make sure they plug up all the holes. Now just imagine your house having a hole in the ceiling and a hole in the window and a hole in the door. You've got to plug it up, because what do you want to be? You want to be nice and warm, and you want to be dry in winter. So they plug everything up. And then what they do is they've got to build their rooms. And the way they build their rooms is they peel the wax off their bellies and they chew it up, and they make all their little rooms where the air conditioner bees can live, the heater bees, and you can have the undertaker bees. They've got to clean out the bees that have died. You've got the nursing bees. You've got to take care of the queen bee. She needs a special room. So they've got to build that. And the baby bees, there's this whole nursery of babies, 2,000 babies. So lots and lots of work has to be done there. And once they've built that and they're happy, they can sit back and have a breather, and then they can start collecting their nectar to make honey. There you go.
That's fantastic. We have a question from Pat. Thank you, Pat. And I think you've got your hand raised in there as well, Pat. Good on you. Yes, you've mentioned Wednesday. There is another session. So Wednesday we're doing the 4th and final part of Bite-Sized Bees. And you also wanted to know what Wednesday's about. So we're talking about the history of beekeeping in South Australia, as well as the different kinds of beehives that exist. And there's a myriad of them. And Sandra's just going to touch on a few of them on Wednesday, because there's only so much we can get into the 15 minutes. And just a reminder for people, with these webinars, each webinar you need to just book into, because we send you a special link to dive into that. So hopefully people will sign up through our website or Facebook for session 4, which is on Wednesday, same time, 1 p.m. And when you've done that, we will send you out a link back to the Zoom webinar so you can join us. So I think just quickly, I will check here. I think we've got that question answered. and that question answered. And you can see my seamless approach to hosting on Zoom. And I think that's it for today. We've had some emails or some chat here to say thank you very much for today, and today's been very interesting. So sorry we're a little bit slow starting today, but we got there in the end. And thank you very much to you all for being part of our Zoom webinar today, and hopefully you can join us for Wednesday. Please tell all of your friends and family and colleagues to sign up. It is free and it does make us feel good to see lots of people in the room. Thanks very much. Any closing words from you, Sandra?
No, thank you, and I look forward to seeing everyone again on Wednesday. Should be fun.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Thank you very
Bye.
much.